On today's podcast, we sit down with Symphonic Distribution CEO and industry trailblazer, Jorge Brea. Jorge is at the forefront of the fight against streaming fraud, and in today's conversation, he pulls back the curtain on the evolving tactics of fraudsters, from bot farms, inflating play counts, to user-generated content manipulation. We dive deep into the very real impact fraud has on artists' royalties, and how advanced technologies like AI are both helping and hindering the battle, and why industry collaboration has never been more vital. He shares insider takes on the Music Fights Fraud Alliance, the power of know your customer methods, the hidden vulnerabilities in today's streaming business models, and what artists must do to safeguard their careers in this rapidly shifting landscape. This conversation is a must listen for anyone navigating the modern music industry, artists, managers, labels, and music entrepreneurs alike. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight.
Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we welcome Jorge Brea, CEO of Symphonic Distribution and a leading voice in the fight against streaming fraud in the music industry. We dive deep into the evolving war on fraudsters who are siphoning millions of dollars away from legitimate artists, and explore the cutting-edge technologies, collaborative initiatives, and industry standards being developed to combat this challenge. Jorge shares powerful insider stories, including his own experience with sabotage through weaponized streaming fraud, and offers practical advice for artists and distributors on how to protect your work, verify your identities, and remain vigilant as music distribution enters an era of unprecedented scale and access. Plus, we talk about the role of AI in both fueling and fighting fraud, why artists need to be more educated and curious than ever, and what to watch out for when choosing promotional partners or distribution solutions. If you care about making a living through music, this is one episode you cannot afford to miss. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Insiders! Are you an aspiring musician, artist, band, or future music business professional looking to take your career to the next level? Well, look no further. At MUBUTV, we offer personalized career counseling and coaching designed specifically for folks like you.
Imagine having both of us by your side, guiding you through every step of your music journey. Our sessions are tailored to meet your unique needs, focusing on critical aspects of your music career, such as refining your songs, defining your artist story, identifying your target audience, and enhancing your social media presence, just to name a few.
Whether you're just starting out or looking to elevate your existing career, we've got you covered. Our comprehensive approach ensures you get insights on everything from live shows to branding and marketing strategies. We understand that every artist is unique. That's why our coaching is personalized just for you.
And here's the best part. We offer flexible coaching packages that fit any budget. Choose from individual sessions ranging from 30 to 90 minutes, or save with our discounted 4-session packages. Experience custom sessions designed to enhance your music career, with opportunities for greater savings when you choose bundled sessions. Investing in your musical journey has never been more accessible.
Imagine the clarity and direction you'll gain after just one session. The feedback on your songs, the strategies to grow your audience, and the confidence to perform live, all tailored just for you.
So why wait? Don't let uncertainty hold you back. Join us for your free 15-minute discovery call at book.mubutv.com for a transformative coaching experience that will elevate your music career. That's book.mubutv.com.
Hi, this is Jill Riley, artist and founder of CGS Records, and you're listening to the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured guest is Jorge Brea, CEO of Symphonic Distribution and a leading voice in the fight against streaming fraud in the music industry. I was really looking forward to this conversation, Eric, because this is one that we don't normally have, and it's not one that I find is actually spoken enough about in the music industry, and we'll get into some of the reasons for that. A lot of artists, a lot of people in the music business don't quite understand the depth and the financial financial impact of streaming fraud. And what I thought was so interesting, I mean, when he talks about the artificial streaming tactics, essentially what we're talking about here, insiders, is that streaming fraud is when people are taking streams of songs and artificially inflating them, putting them on streaming services for someone else, not you, but some other system, to make money off of your music or of someone's music that's not legitimate. It's done through things like, fraud, bots, streaming farms, or companies that are deploying thousands of phones to inflate streaming counts. It is a problem, and it is something that is affecting your ability to make income. And the more successful you are, often the more of a likelihood you're going to become a victim of streaming fraud yourself or your songs. And it's important to understand this.
Yeah, it's very important. And I thought one of the other areas that we touch on in this interview is the AI that's being used in fraud detection. AI is being increasingly used for data pattern analysis, both to fight fraud and unfortunately also to perpetrate it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword with this. But we asked him in this interview, because I asked him, I think I was the one that asked him that, do you think AI can help in this fight with what you guys are doing? And they said, absolutely. So this is one of the areas where AI, because, there's been so much flack about the good and the bad of AI, but this is one of the areas where I think AI will be really helpful in combating this and detecting it.
And so necessary.
Yes.
So necessary, because we are heading into a
Wild West again of
the Wild West and an algorithm age.
Right.
We literally are. Music is going to become more and more and more. You think it's accessible now. It's going to become even more so with the technologies and AI and the ability to create music that we don't even know is real. We're heading into an age where, insiders, we don't know what's real and what's fake anymore.
Right.
We literally don't.
Yes.
I mean, we're seeing that, we first saw it in the movies years ago.
You're seeing it in social media posts now that are coming out where you just, like, obviously now everybody's picking up, oh, that's AI, and you'll see it immediately in the comments. AI is a wonderful thing.
Yes, but it's scary.
But and this is just, we're just in AI 1.0. We're not, I don't think we've evolved even into 2.0 and 3.0, and it's already doing insane things, and it's just going to get even, better.
Yeah, and the thing about, the AI, sometimes you can see AI. In this particular case of what we're talking about here, you don't see it.
It's elusive.
It's elusive, and it's behind the
right.
And your income is what's being affected. And this is why, insiders, this is such an important thing for you to know about, because the very nature of how you're going to be making money on your music is radically being affected. Remember, there is only so much of a pot in terms of financial remuneration, and you want to make sure that you get your fair share and that it's not being siphoned away via fraud or bots or any of these other systems.
And with that, insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured conversation with Jorge Brea.
Jorge, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. You've been very vocal around the subject of fraud in streaming, and you've pointed out that fraudsters are, they're siphoning millions of dollars in royalties away from legitimate artists. What are some of the most common tactics that they're using today, and how have they evolved over time?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the most common tactics is an activity that is called artificial streaming, and that effectively refers to the practice of manipulating, music streaming platforms to inflate play counts, follow numbers, etc. So what we often see is a promotional company or even someone, with the means and resources actually having an ability to have one song be played multiple times by way of bots, or even by working with a company that literally has thousands of cell phones in their office just focused on streaming a song over and over and over. That's one of the most commonly discussed aspects of fraud, but there are others, such as obviously the traditional copyright infringement, which still unfortunately is a problem, and even a new form of fraud that we see quite often called user-generated content manipulation, which effectively is someone grabbing something from a live program or TV show, for example, and inserting it in the middle of their song to throw off these user-generated content platforms a la YouTube, Meta, etc. So it's always evolving, unfortunately.
Interesting. So they're like kind of doing that to not detect the UGC kind of counterfeit technology, I guess?
Yeah, so with the way that Content ID, which is YouTube's proprietary system, works is, anytime that you upload a song into that platform, it is finding any asset, video or audio, that matches what's been uploaded. So unfortunately, what fraudsters are doing is they insert and they infringe and they add a portion of someone else's audio that is not belonging to them into that file to then effectively start to illegally claim. So those are one of those things that we watch very carefully. In Symphonic, we actually have advanced KYC methods, which are know your customer methods. So we actually ask for identification. We're fingerprinting and scanning audio. Everything before a song goes out is effectively done to ensure that, fraud doesn't occur and so forth. But these methods are getting more and more creative, unfortunately.
Thank you for joining us on the show. I wanted to ask you, since publishing your op-ed, what shifts have you observed across the industry and how seriously streaming fraud is being taken, not just in discourse, but in actual implementation?
Yeah, so I think, even before the op-ed was posted, we've been working very closely with our competitor partners with the Music Fights Fraud Alliance, ensuring that, we can all share best practices and even data on fraudsters and individuals that are partaking in improper activity. That's been probably the biggest thing that's happened. It's the ability to be able to connect and partner and collaborate even with competitors, because this problem effectively supersedes competition. So I think it's been really, really great to see that everybody is willing to solve the problem. And I think, what I believe will need to happen is more and more distributors are going to need to implement similar methods and tactics that we have. They're going to have to start asking for identifications and IDs or passports or anything before uploading a song or even before getting payment, just to make sure that this person is legitimate, for example. So I think there's more conversation and interest, I would say, around the KYC aspect than originally before that op-ed, I would say.
Jorge, you personally experienced sabotage through weaponized streaming fraud. And, I'm curious, what did that incident reveal to you about the vulnerabilities in the current system, both technical and psychological?
Yeah, I think what it revealed is that effectively everybody can be a target. I think the fact that we're pretty vocal about artificial streaming and fraudsters, I think is definitely one reason why I was probably targeted as well. But it really, really started to, I would say, create a fog of war where legitimate artists were starting to report that, they were definitely not doing any fraudulent activities, but that their songs were being added to illegal playlists and things of that nature. So it really revealed that you kind of have to consider the source of who's reporting the fraud, and also look at the data. And I would say, again, really know who you're dealing with to make sure that you can kind of use all that context to make decisions whenever you're policing this stuff, which I can admittedly say is quite difficult for distributors, because we only have so many data points that we can rely on. And, to be totally frank with you, not much support from the DSPs.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I wanted to ask you something that you had mentioned before. You talk about the ID aspect and, knowing your customer. Is it your experience that a lot of this fraud is coming from people who are trying to place music on the systems like Symphonic and other distributors? Or is it coming from bad players who are seeing that material and doing bad things with it?
Unfortunately, I would say it's all the above, sadly. We've gotten to the point where we've seen individuals that we can easily have awareness of that they're trying to upload music for nefarious activity, because we are fingerprinting and scanning every piece of audio against any live music that is out there. And then we've also seen the fact that, we've seen good artists be sabotaged, unfortunately. So it's just starting to get to the point where there's a lot of multiple battles on the battlefront, but I don't want to sound totally pessimistic. I will say that all of our efforts, and I think that's the real big point here, is that there are a lot of efforts actually do matter. Not only is checking identification, but also being transparent with your customer too about the fact that, we actually display the amount of artificial streams that you might have on your song. All of that is helpful to be able to kind of educate yourself and be able to kind of have a feedback loop with us to say, hey, this artist is saying that this 10,000 streams that they have is not artificial, but we're reporting it as artificial. Why? Let's go ahead and see what we can do to push for them on the DSPs at that point. But unfortunately, as what you mentioned, I've seen effectively all of the above.
Very interesting. And I have a sub-question to Rich's sub-question. Do you see AI playing a role in helping you guys with this, or is it helping you right now as we speak?
Yeah, so I would say at some point we will probably become much more active in terms of AI fighting AI. I think the way that we've been using it the most is to interpret data and to kind of like help us establish patterns in the data. That's been kind of the easiest way of, let's say, leveraging AI. What I have seen is AI being used for nefarious purposes already, of course. It's already got a negative connotation when you're thinking about the fact that AI is not human operated. But when we've watched very, very carefully individuals that are uploading just mass amounts of content, and those are the accounts that we watch very carefully, because usually it's kind of like another nature of artificial streaming activity where they're sprinkling in, artificial activity over, thousands of files, for example. So those are some of the new trends that we're seeing. And in order to be able to do that effectively, you need a lot of content, in which turn, obviously, AI can be helpful with that.
Yeah, I was just wondering if maybe the AI could help you with training the models to try to combat actually the fraud that is going on. I just didn't know if that was something that was being applied.
Yeah, so I would say in that sense, no. However, we are working closely with this artist by the name of the Flashbulb, or AKA Ben Jordan. He's got a really nifty tool called Poisonify. This is more, I would say, for the artist that is really, really wanting to ensure that any generative music AI platform is not just, going ahead and scraping their music, for example. So he actually added a technology that can be embedded in the file. You never hear it or see it really, but any company, let's say the Sunos or the Udios of the world, that is looking to effectively train their model with that song, it actually hurts their model. So that's a really cool use of a sort of like an AI technology being embedded in a file to ensure that artists' rights are protected. And that's one of which we're likely going to explore some more.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you, Jorge, Symphonic's identity verification system has reduced fraud by over 50% among new signups. This is a two-part question. Number one, what insights has it revealed that were most surprising or illuminating? And the second one is, why do you think more distributors haven't adopted similar safeguards?
Yeah. So I think what was illuminating is just how kind of lazy fraudsters can be. We've actually seen a situation where it's one person that is giving us their identity, we block them, and subsequently, that's a great way because we can actually see if they have multiple accounts. So effectively, if you're blocking one ID or taking one person off your platform, you could take multiple accounts that they might have been involved with. So that's one benefit. But what we've seen in terms of the laziness is they're taking their photo, and then yet their counterpart will take the same sort of like photo with the same background. So effectively, you can start to see that this fraudster is involved in a potential ring of individuals, right? But it's also like funny to me how they're like so obviously just sitting in the exact same place and not even like willing to try to actually like be getting around it and so forth. So that's been funny. In terms of distributors and others not adopting it, I believe honestly, other companies may have pretty significant scale where they deem any sort of friction as potentially negative to their business. But I think as a message to all those that might be listening that have scale and that have just a lot of users, I think we actually received a lot of positive attention feedback when we launched the identity verification tool, because it was also protecting their account. That it isn't just so much about detracting fraud, which is very much is a big deal, but it's also about ensuring that we know that this account belongs to you. You are the owner, you're the contracting party, and that if anybody happens to ever hack into your account, we're able to put safeguards in and ensure that those people go through identity verification. If we don't recognize them, then it effectively protects your account. So I think if it were to be sold more like that, I think for distributors that have scale, I would see potentially more folks doing it. And that would be my hope and goal.
Interesting. Jorge, I want to back up for a second and pick up on something that you said in your last answer. You mentioned that fraud often originates from the same entities in the same locations. And I'm wondering, can you elaborate on how geographic or behavioral data helps you trace and neutralize fraud networks?
Yeah, for sure. So we definitely have seen, what we like to call fraud rings, right? So this is effectively like potentially one company or entities that are established in different territories around the world where they're just having individual after individual create accounts on all these distributor platforms. So the Identify technology that we integrated was able to let us know the IP address of where you're based, the location of where you're based, and also it can actually has advanced methods in terms of like detecting VPN usage as well, which is really interesting. But ultimately, it's just helped us to ensure that we're catching multiple accounts that are created by multiple people and or the same person. So once we block one account, that's one person, one account. But often a trend that you see across the board in every distributor and potentially even on all the DSPs is that a fraud ring is creating just multiple accounts in order to sort of like hide their fraud or spread it around so that it kind of like goes undetected. So the benefit is once we see fraudulent activity in one place where we're able to then determine that that one account is also owning multiple ones, then we're effectively seeing similar patterns of behavior on the other ones. And that's enabled us to like cut down on multiple accounts. And then subsequently, every ID that we're actually kicking out, we're able to put a blocker in so that if they try to come back in, they can't. And it's kind of like a slowish war, but we've gotten about 3,000 identities now blocked. This is only in the past couple of years since we launched this. And that's what's, I would say, really driving the decrease of new fraud coming in. It's because we've now got a history of identities that cannot infiltrate our system anymore. And these are the types of things that we could actually share with our competitors in a way that is not violating privacy standards, because there are methods of actually hashing and kind of encrypting even the identity to then be able to be sharing it with others. And that's one of the reasons why we are really encouraging others to use the same kind of like identity platform that we are, because at that point then we're building a list of actual fraudulent actors and so forth.
Jorge, let me ask you, as you're on the front lines of this, are the current business models of DSPs, which incentivize mass content ingestion, inherently at odds with meaningful anti-fraud efforts?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of talk around, artist-centric streaming versus the current model, which is, obviously combining freemium and premium accounts and distributing earnings pro rata based on market share, right? I would say that there's definitely some of that, in terms of like the models being at odds. But, personally, I think that there could be quite a bit more done, even with the DSPs, with the current models. Like, and for me, I'm going to come across as a bit, obviously, capitalistic here with some of my viewpoints. But, I think that there's been a problem where too many distributors have popped up. And what I mean by too many distributors is there are companies that effectively white label the aspect of you being a distributor. And I think that in turn is definitely one issue that needs to be, better addressed with company by company. If you're launching a software company that is saying, hey, you can become a distributor, you need to make sure that you have similar standards as what I'm talking about here. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of compound the problem over and over and over. And fraud skips around. Once they know that Symphonic or others are strong, they're going to go somewhere else where they know that they're not strong to get away with the behavior. So I think, number one, if the DSPs could control the amount of content coming in within reason, I think that helps. And then I think in general, there could be just more friction that the DSPs could actually put on the distributor, which is kind of nutty for me to say, obviously, but I think that if the standards can increase distributor to distributor, A, I think it's competitive advantage. And I think B, it's going to be harder for this sort of fraud to get through. And that's kind of like how we're trying to almost operate ourselves is how do we raise our standard? How do we become a bit more selective while also still running a scalable, growing and thriving business at the end of the day? And that is creating friction points and creating entry points where we're asking you even certain questions, like if you're using AI in your product, all these different things are helpful for us in terms of establishing a full identity of who you are and what you're doing for us to then better make our decision-making easier.
Hey, insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured conversation. Stay tuned because we've got so much value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, Eric, as an artist, what do you find are the most challenging aspects to a music career, especially when you're starting out?
Well, I think one of the first things is just trying to get the direction of who you are as an artist, where you want to go, where you want to be. And, we've talked about it on the show a lot. Who is your target audience? Who you are? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? What do you think would resonate with an audience? And so those are some of the things that I would feel being a new artist. Obviously, what I know now is different because I know these things. But for people that are out there like our audience that don't have necessarily any direction to go would be the first things that I would start off with.
And having the song songs that
Absolutely.
incorporate those elements that you're speaking of into it. That's so important today.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we started MUBUTV and why we started this new consulting service that we're offering to all of our insiders out there, because that is another one of the big things. I mean, that is the big thing, is like having the great songs. That's what it really starts off. Our friend Don Grierson always said, it always starts with a great song. So that's probably, besides putting together what your audience and what your target audience is the single most important thing. Where are your songs at currently today? Are you collaborating with people? Are you trying to go out to networking events where you can connect with other songwriters and stuff like that? So
yeah, and what are your strengths?
Exactly.
You know, are you a strong lyric writer? Are you a strong melody writer? Are you a strong musician, a player?
Right.
You know, and it's really important to get really strong clarity on those issues before proceeding.
I totally agree, Rich. And, you know, with our consulting services, we offer a myriad of different packages and we've made it super affordable for everybody. So, you know, if you guys are interested out there in connecting with us on a coaching call, you can visit book.mubutv.com and start off with a free 15-minute discovery call.
Well, yeah, absolutely. There we start with an initial 15-minute call where we can get a sense of who you are, what are the issues that you specifically have, right, and want to work on.
Exactly.
And we can go from there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we tailor everything to your needs. It's not like a cookie cutter thing. We kind of really want to get to know who you are as an artist, where you at today, what's the snapshot of you as an artist today, and then start trying to craft something that's tailor-made for you. So again, if you're interested, visit us at book.mubutv.com for your 15-minute discovery call.
Hi, this is Holly Hutchison. I am A&R Girl, letter A-N-R Girl. Are you an insider? I am. Subscribe now.
You know, it is so interesting listening, especially to your last answer, Jorge, in a bigger meta context of the music business, because, you know, one of the things that, you know, as I'm sure you realize, you know, having been in this business a long time, and that you know, I as a veteran, I've been in it 47 years, is that we're in an era now where, you know, music and artists, they used to have to be selected, and they were signed and somebody made a record with them because somebody chose to do that. And it was a lot of money. And, you know, one of the things you pointed out is that, you know, a lot of this is now happening where anybody and everybody can make music. You can make music. Your neighbor can make music. Your neighbor's children can make music. And it's not even so much as, you know, the cost anymore. Now the real issue is, how do you bring attention to what you are doing? That's the problem that the major labels have. It's the problem that Disney has. It's the problem that all media, not only music, has. And it's interesting listening to you, because this is now one of the other elements that we now see. It's, you know, I remember an interview we did with T-Bone Burnett at a conference I did one time, the producer, where he said, I've been in this for 50 years and I've never seen a time when so much music will never be listened to. So much music that has no context to it. And, you know, it kind of reminds me, I was reading like an interview with you where you said, you know, this fraud is like a virus, you know, as you mentioned. And I guess my question then becomes, what technologies, you know, either in use or in development, hold the most promise for proactively identifying and preventing fraud in the next, you know, 2 to 5 years in your mind?
Yeah. So I think, first off, all that you mentioned is super interesting. I'm a huge T-Bone Burnett fan as well, of course. You know, I think the technologies that probably have the most promise are what some of the big DSPs are doing. I think the user-generated content platforms, a la YouTube, Meta, and even TikTok as well, those standards are also growing, and their technologies are growing and getting better and better, which is fantastic, because that makes even distributors not have to build their own thing, you know? And that's a great detector of fraud and great data points that you can grab to then further investigate, you know, fraudulent activity. So I think those companies are going to continue to evolve and only get better and better. I think even the technologies that we're using, we leverage a platform called ACR Cloud, and that platform enables us to then, it's kind of embedded in our technology. So anytime that you upload a song and before it gets approved by one of our approvers, we're actually scanning every piece of audio against any live, you know, piece of music that's out there right now. That enables us to kind of better detect and say, okay, what percentage of this song might be sampled, or what percentage is a false positive, because kicks and snares can effectively sound similar too, and it might not be direct copyright infringement, for example. You know, so things like that will only improve, I think, with machine learning and AI as well. Then they're also improving from a derivative work standpoint in terms of like slowing up or speeding up songs and so forth, which is another, fraudulent activity that bad actors do in terms of infringing content. So that will definitely improve. And then lastly, I believe that, the identification company and system that we're using, it's a company called Identify. They're already quite advanced. So, just talking to them about their future plans makes me pretty excited, because I think the amount of data that we're going to be able to get is only going to increase. And then I think the big challenge is going to be what you do with all this data, and how do you actually then take it to the next step in terms of investigating and hopefully pursuing individuals for criminal activity, which unfortunately it's a bit difficult, because the case has to be big enough in dollars, I think, to matter to certain jurisdictions and governments, unfortunately. And then the last thing I would say is, technology will also, I think, be for the worse. As you started mentioning, there is so much content, and this is where I think AI is very much going to change the distribution model, in my opinion. I think it's kind of wild to me that there are, unlimited, you can upload anything you want services out there. You know what I mean? And this is an area where we are looking at better monetizing and further, I think, better controlling, because, anyone's going to be an individual that can make like 20 songs in an hour now. And, those 20 songs are going to cost, hosting, bandwidth, manpower in terms of policing and distribution. So I think the technologies and the ability of creating music is getting better, but it's also going to become a detriment to what we do, and where we will have to adopt and pivot a little bit to combat some of that.
How do you envision the role of government regulation versus industry self-regulation in tackling streaming fraud long-term?
Yeah, I think that personally, I think this issue is not important enough for governments, even around the world. And I honestly think the best sort of, regulation really comes from the DSPs. There's been some of that already in terms of, you have to have 1,000 streams in a trailing 12-month period in order to make earnings on Spotify. Like, those things kind of help. But I think ultimately there are other intricacies that these DSPs can put in place that I think helps. And I would say that, it's not just Spotify, but Amazon, Apple, Deezer, all of these sort of DSPs are doing things and kind of creating more standards and more, we can call it regulation, to, I think, better police and safeguard as much as possible. But unfortunately, things get through. And, it's going to be very impossible to be perfect in this. And I don't ever work on needing to be perfect, and no one should, in my view. But if things can just improve a little bit better, then that would make a big difference. And I also think that artists need to be educated and aware. We try to do as much as possible of that, to be able to tell folks, hey, this is what you have to ask this company in order to ensure that they are legitimate, for example, because there's a lot of promotional companies that unfortunately are using, various ways and means to be able to kind of like guarantee streams. And those are generally the ones that create a lot of the issues as well.
You spoke about some of those questions that folks should be asking, Jorge. What else should they be asking?
Yeah, so I think it's, if you're an artist or manager or label and you're interested in using a promotional company, one of the first things that you should be watchful of is any service that's effectively selling you a guaranteed amount of streams for a price. That's not how it works. It's very difficult in order for that to be a thing. And anybody that's doing that is generally doing nefarious activity. So I think that's one big red flag. I think asking them if, various questions before you try is good, like such as, do you comply with, Spotify's terms of service? How do they vet curators and playlisters that they work with? If it's one of those companies that engages the third-party playlister market, providing examples of curators with verified followings, what tools and systems they use to potentially detect fraudulent activity, how they remove curators, all of these, things right here is sort of like the ability of being curious, and I think unfortunately what we are driven by is an artist sees what they see on TV or TikTok or anything like that, and they want to skip playing in the bars and the nightclubs where you really kind of like learn your way, and they want to skip straight to the arena. So that's why they want to go for a service or company that's like, yeah, I want to get 1 million streams. Like, and those 1 million streams are going to lead to X and X and X. And it's like, unfortunately, it really doesn't always work that way whatsoever. And this is why we try to preach that artists need to be asking questions way more than what they might be doing, and to not just be driven by like immediate fame, so to speak.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up because, you're talking right to the heart and the philosophy and the commitment that Eric and I have with this podcast. MUBUTV Music Business Television podcast is all about educating artists. I come from, the music business from, the late 70s on. But if there's one thing that I have learned is that in order to make a successful career, you must continually, and you've articulated this, you must continually educate yourself. It's my belief that artists, like you just said, if they are to be artists in terms of, if this is to be their career, that there's a lot more that they need to be educated about other than just, the musical aspect. I mean, I remember a time when if you were an incredible singer or an incredible songwriter or a great performer, there was a whole business, a whole system that was in place to sign you and market you and promote you and put you out on the road. And, of course, that system took most of your money, but it was there for the select few that managed to get it. And even then, only 10 to 15% of those people that got that chance ever had the success. But today, as we're discussing, artists do need to be educated. And this is one of the great, it's almost like artists are the only people who did not get that memo. Like you were saying,
Right.
they want the million streams. And we've all seen the situations where people get the million streams and they're not ready for what is demanded of them. I mean, in the real sense of the business, if you happen to have that kind of meteoric or what they call viral, and you're not ready for it, you're not ready to tour, you don't have, a whole body of work, you don't have a show, your career will falter. I mean, that's just the bottom line. It will, and today I think, like you're pointing out, you need to be educated. And I'm so glad that you talked about that because that goes right to the heart and soul of what we're wanting to do. I wanted to ask you discussed this a little bit. Do you believe that there should be some sort of standardized or perhaps even like an open source anti-fraud protocol for distributors and DSPs alike? If you do, why or why not?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's difficult to make something that, everyone can effectively adopt with because there's different countries with different kind of restrictions, and I think some DSPs work differently, or there's some DSPs that are obviously larger in market share than others. So I think the problem is different DSP by DSP and certainly by DSP type. I mentioned a little bit about obviously the UGC platforms like YouTube, Meta, et cetera. Like the kind of problems you see there are different than what you see on streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple and so forth. So I think it's difficult, I would say, to create a protocol of sorts, but this is where I think, we're doing a lot of work with the Music Fights Fraud Alliance. It's ourselves and other, competitors that are in there. And we've been doing a ton of stuff. It's just that unfortunately people haven't really seen it yet, because we haven't, I would say, talked a lot about what we're doing, which all of that is slated to change and improve now that we've got a new leader there on board that we're really excited about. So I would say that, we're going to be potentially communicating a lot about some of our successes that we've had. But I can tell you that for sure, we're using anonymized data right now from many different distributors and be able to say, hey, we are investigating this account and we've seen this activity on it. Let's effectively match it to the Music Fights Fraud Alliance database and see if there's also reported fraud for this ISRC or this song, et cetera. That's been super helpful in order to kind of just verify and validate our decision making. Because unfortunately, sometimes decisions are being made by distributors that it's more instinctual and it's more evidential, but the DSP hasn't caught it yet. And that's a bit of our responsibility that they are putting on us, right? We are looking at streaming data at a granular level. If we're seeing one song get a massive spike and then drop and or have kind of a roller coaster of analytics, these are the things that we're looking for to be able to then detect. And sometimes it's about making the decision before it's being reported, which puts you in a very bad spot, unfortunately, because, that's where you're hopeful that you're making the right decision. And I think distributors have made some correct decisions, but sometimes, unfortunately, in that fog of war have admittedly, I think made mistakes. And that's why I see legitimate artists being affected, unfortunately, without them purposely doing it.
Jorge, throughout your life, have there been any books or films that you found to be particularly inspiring, professionally speaking, that you could share with our audience?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, my dad was much more of a voracious reader than I was. I'm definitely more about film.
Oh, yeah, we'll share some of those. That'll be great.
Yeah. But I mean, I love, like, Stanley Kubrick is my guy,
Nice.
and you know, it doesn't really relate to business per se, but for me, it's like what I love about film is just the creative nature of it and just being like challenged and tested through it. And that's where, you know, like Stanley Kubrick to me is like my actual inspiration. And it's in a weird way, it's like, it has nothing to do with business, but it's just like kind of like paving your own path and effectively doing your own thing without kind of like needing to follow the standard and the mold is the actual like influence that I think I've applied to what we're doing. You know, we're based out of Tampa, Florida, which we love it down here. It's nice and sunny and humid sometimes, but we're not necessarily a major music market. And a lot of people, when I go around the world, they're like, why Tampa? And I'm like, well, why not? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
you can build a business like this and it's okay. And, you know, we do have people in New York and different places as well. But, you know, I think it's kind of like, that's for me, like him as a visionary and a filmmaker and his films and just kind of like paving your own path and or individuals that are being creative in that field from business all the way to media is kind of like, to me, the inspiration, so to speak.
Yeah, I think me and Ritch, I can speak for Ritch, we are both huge film buffs, and Stanley Kubrick is one of the all-time favorite directors, just his body of work. And like you said, that visionary path that he had was, you know, he was a trailblazer and a maverick. So
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely.
Jorge, as the CEO of one of the leading music distributors, what is your advice for artists who are committed to building a music career for themselves in today's dramatically shifting marketplace?
Yeah. So, you know, this is a great question because I think it's about how, you know, it's not about necessarily fraud or anything. It's about like how to do it. And, you know, for those that might not know, I started off making music. That's kind of like my background, you know, so it's like an artist by artist kind of company. And we have many individuals that do that here. It was a very different industry. You know, obviously, Ritch, you know this industry way more than I do, and you've seen it evolve and change. But I was still kind of coming into it when it was, you know, very vinyl and CD oriented, but without the resurgence that we've had. And this is sort of when download was building, and then I saw download to streaming, et cetera. So like being an artist back then is different than it is now. And what I tell people now is I think it's really cool to do collaborations. You know, if you're looking at the world of Spotify in particular, and you're looking to grow and do it organically, if you have the means and the ability and the creativity to be able to put yourself to work with another artist and you're both effectively primary artists, then you're really engaging each other's communities and followers. And that's a great way because you're building catalog, which is like building your house. And then you're leveraging a totally different, you know, potential fan base that maybe is in the same style or genre that you might be specialized in, but that effectively will help kind of get your recognition out there, and subsequently it will grow your streams. So I've been personally, like, I've done that, but I like in terms of like remixes, my followers and my listeners are not huge because I do music now because I love it. And it's like, I'm not pursuing an artist career. It's more so of, can I remix our clients, for example? Like things like that are interesting to me. And that really is like pretty wild because we've seen just organic activity. Like I'm a nobody artist and I'm at least getting streams that are authentic and legitimate. And that's happening because I'm tapping into somebody else's community. So that's one of the biggest things that I always like focus on, because of the fact that making music is a little bit easier and more accessible now. The real work is in trying to reach out to somebody that has a particular style and network that is within reach that you can make a song with, and then you can release it together. And all these systems, including ours now, have the ability for you to set splits and things like that. So it's a very fair sort of like environment now, much more so than it was before in terms of streams and so forth. So that's the one I wanted to honestly focus on and answer without going way too deep, because I just think it's a great one that can create new art authentically and, you know, see great collaborations and so forth.
Wonderful. Jorge, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to discuss this very important issue and to educate artists on why they need to be focusing on this and how it affects them directly. So we're very, very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm a massive fan. You know, Ritch, you're a legend. Eric, you're the man. So thank you both very much for having me, and keep up the great work always.
Thank you so much. Man, such an important conversation, and one, Eric, that I don't think is had enough.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree.
You know, I think one of the most interesting things that, you know, you always try to learn something from every single guest. And the thing that I learned here was, I've known about streaming fraud, but I never knew the specifics, how it is done. How are people being ripped off?
Right.
By getting more and more streams. You'd think, well, that would be helpful. And on the surface.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's our second guest. We had Lisa Ferris that we've had on the show as well, too. That it's another kind of, I don't want to say insidious, it's just that the people are not educated, but this is a big part of your revenue, guys, that you're listening to right now. So where the public performances are not being reported, in this case, this is something else that's being more insidious, where it's siphoning the streams and going to somebody else's account.
Absolutely, Eric. That's such an important point, and it's one that I picked up from in the conversation with him, because one of the ways in which they're doing that is by taking your song or any song, often user-generated content, which is effectively taking someone, grabbing something from a live TV show or a program or a recording and inserting it into their recording.
Right.
Thus,
and then they're making the claim for that, and that money's coming to them.
Exactly. When it should be going to you, because your song is being used to generate that stream. So that's just one of the ways in which it's done. I mean, he talked about so many of the other ways, but I thought that was one of the most interesting ways, in which they do that. And by the way, this is something that's done with a lot of the content carriers, whether it's streaming on YouTube, streaming on TikTok, streaming on streaming services like Apple or Spotify or Deezer or any of those others.
Yeah, the other area that I thought where he revealed that effectively everybody can be a target, legitimate artists are starting to report that, that they were definitely not doing fraudulent activities, but that their songs were being added to a legal playlist and things of that nature. So that's how insidious this thing is, that people are not realizing that my music, especially if you got a big song or hit single or something, imagine all the UGC content that's out there in all of these platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, on and on and on, and how much revenue that the company and you as a writer could be missing out on.
Yeah, precisely. And that's what I thought was so important, is that he takes us through not only the landscape of this, but the specificity of how, like you just were explaining, how it's being done, the methods in which it's being done, and what you can do to prevent it.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.